I had always imagined that my life would remain quietly unremarkable. But at 32 years old, I find myself ready to unfold the chapters of my past that altered everything. My name is Alina, and I'm about to share how a series of events transformed my life. When I was just 15, back in those days, my family was pretty average, just me, Mom, and Dad, residing in a snug little home on Maple Street. Dad was a construction worker, and Mom kept the books for a local business. At the time, we weren't wealthy, but we found contentment in our simple, joyful life together. That normalcy shattered the day Dad suffered a fatal accident. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning that turned tragic, and just like that, he was gone. The aftermath saw Mom breaking down completely. Days and nights blurred into one another as she stared vacantly, overwhelmed by grief. I swiftly learned to fend for myself. About 8 months after we lost Dad, Mom's demeanor shifted as she nervously fiddled with her coffee cup one evening. "Alina, honey," she began, her voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you. I've met someone. His name is Ethan, and he's brought happiness back into my life." The signs had been there: secretive phone calls, sudden care about her looks, unexplained outings. Yet hearing that Ethan would not only be a part of her life but would also be moving in with his young daughter, Freya, felt like a blow. "But Mom, it's only been 8 months. I protested, unable to mask my dismay. "I know, sweetie," she interjected with a newfound sternness. "But life must go on. Ethan is a kind man, and Freya needs a mother figure. We can be a family again." That notion of family materialized when Ethan and his daughter, Freya, a small girl with blonde pigtails and wide blue eyes, moved in. Freya was the kind of child Mom had always dreamed of having, adorable and needing attention, which Mom provided in full, neglecting me in the process. I watched, feeling forgotten as Mom doted on Freya, embracing her role as the perfect stepmother. The reality of my new life hit hard about a week after their arrival. Ethan's mother visited, and her immediate critique and obvious disapproval of me, illustrated by a painful pinch to my cheek, underscored her disdain. "What a big girl you are," she remarked, as if I were an inconvenience in her son's newly perfect life. As days turned into weeks, Mom, Ethan, and Freya formed a tight-knit circle, enjoying outings and laughter, which seemed to exclude me. Life settled into this new routine, where I existed on the periphery, observing a family scene in which I no longer played a part. As my new life with Mom, Ethan, and his daughter settled into a disheartening routine, I increasingly found myself away from home, visiting Mom's friend Madison's house under the guise of being helpful. "Alina, honey," Mom would say, her gaze drifting elsewhere. "Madison needs help with little Tessa today. You don't mind, do you?" So, I'd head over to Madison's, where at least I felt welcome. Tessa was a delightful 5-year-old with bouncy curls and a gap-toothed smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. She would run up to me and scream, "Airy," as soon as I stepped through the door. Spending time with Tessa turned into the best part of my days. We'd construct massive blanket forts, hold tea parties with her plush toys, and read books with me voicing the characters in funny accents. Madison sometimes joined us with snacks, genuinely interested in my school life and listening attentively to my stories. Those moments felt like what family was supposed to be, caring and engaging. Back in my own house, the atmosphere was starkly different. Mrs. Henderson, Ethan's mother, seemed to have taken up semi-permanent residence, constantly changing our home to her liking. She would criticize every detail, from the curtains to the wall colors, and Mom would hurriedly follow her directives. "This wall should be eggshell, not cream," she would demand. Soon, Mom would be comparing paint samples at the store. Mrs. Henderson also took a peculiar interest in critiquing me relentlessly. She'd pinch my cheeks hard, scold my table manners, and comment disparagingly on my posture. Meanwhile, Ethan had his harsh ways. Minor accidents like a dropped glass or a spilled plate would trigger fierce outbursts about my carelessness and accusations of being a freeloader. With every incident, I hoped for Mom to intervene, but she remained silent, preoccupied with Freya or other household tasks, effectively ignoring the situation. When I turned 17, something within me snapped. I was determined not to be seen as a burden any longer. That morning, I began a small venture of my own, posting flyers around the neighborhood offering dog walking services. By the afternoon, I had secured my first few clients. Mrs. Jasmine from a couple of streets over was hesitant at first. "You want to walk dogs? What about all the schoolwork you teenagers have?" I assured her confidently, "I can manage both. I'm responsible and do well in school." Reluctantly, she handed over her golden retriever's leash. "All right, let's give it a try. Max needs a walk every day after school. $22 per walk." That was just the start. Soon, I was walking multiple dogs on weekends and helping elderly Mr. Lincoln with his grocery shopping. Madison even officially hired me as Tessa's after-school nanny, a role I had been filling for free until then. This newfound independence was not just about earning money, it was about asserting my worth and changing my narrative, from a dependent child to a responsible young adult. Regardless, I was determined to save every penny I earned. I avoided spending on trivial things like candy or movies, which were typical indulgences for someone my age. After 4 diligent months of saving, I finally had enough to purchase what I had been longing for, a smartphone. It wasn't anything high-end, just a basic model that was on sale, but it was entirely mine. The sense of ownership brought an irrepressible smile to my face. This phone represented my hard work, something no one could claim they had given me. The day I brought it home, my excitement was palpable. I was in my room setting it up when Freya, who was 9 by then and had developed a habit of demanding everything she liked, barged in without knocking. "What's that?" she demanded, her finger pointing at my new phone. "It's my new phone," I replied, striving to keep my tone even. "I bought it with the money I earned from my jobs." Her eyes widened in envy. Before I could react, Freya dashed downstairs, crying out for Ethan. I heard his footsteps thumping up the stairs, and my heart sank. "What's wrong, princess?" he inquired from my doorway. "Alina has a phone, and I want it," Freya complained, pointing accusingly at me. What happened next still infuriates me when I think about it. Without uttering a single word to me, Ethan snatched the phone from my hands and handed it to Freya, saying, "Daddy's got you covered, sweetheart." I was livid, blinded by anger. The following day, I confided everything to my English teacher, Mrs. Sutton, the incident with the phone, Ethan's demeaning attitude, and my mother's apathy. She listened intently and then escorted me to the principal's office. By that afternoon, my mother was summoned to the school. I wasn't present in the meeting, but I heard the raised voices. When Mom emerged, her face flushed with anger, she thrust the phone back into my hands without meeting my eyes. "Here," she said through clenched teeth. "I hope you're happy now." That evening, after Freya had spent hours crying over losing the phone, Mom confronted me in my room. "How dare you," she hissed venomously. "Go behind our backs like that. Do you know how embarrassing that was? You're nothing but a traitor." For the next 2 weeks, both she and Ethan treated me as if I were invisible, barely acknowledging my presence, even at the dinner table. The next 3 years maintained the same pattern. I immersed myself in my jobs and focused intently on my studies, recognizing that education was my pathway out of this situation. When my senior year arrived, I applied for every scholarship I could find. The day a letter from State College arrived, my anxiety was palpable. I waited until I was alone to open it, my hands trembling so much that I could barely tear the envelope. "Dear Miss Thompson, we are pleased to inform you." I read and reread the letter 3 times before the reality settled in. I had been granted a full scholarship. Overwhelmed, I realized I had secured my departure for college without needing a dime from Ethan. Foolishly, I thought this achievement might shift their perspective, perhaps even restore my mother's recognition of me. I decided to share the news at dinner that night, hoping it would spark a change. As everyone gathered around the dinner table, a mix of anticipation and anxiety filled the air. I mustered the courage to share my news, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom, Ethan, I have some great news, I said, my heart racing. I've been accepted to State College. The sound of Ethan's fork hitting his plate echoed through the room. His voice was tinged with disbelief. You applied to college without telling us, he snapped. How dare you make such decisions on your own, living under my roof, eating the food I provide. I hurried to explain, hoping to ease the tension. But it's a full scholarship. It won't cost you anything. Ethan's response was harsh and immediate. Of course I wouldn't pay. Why would I spend a dime on a sneaky, ungrateful person like you? Desperate for an ally, I turned to my mother, who seemed lost in her world, pushing her food around her plate. Mom, please. Can't you see my side? I pleaded. When she finally met my gaze, her eyes were void of warmth. Why should I support you? She snapped. You've never respected us or accepted Ethan. It feels like you've been against us from the start. Stunned by her words, a surge of old wounds and suppressed anger overwhelmed me. Respect him? How can I respect someone who has done nothing but bully and belittle me? Out of nowhere, a sharp pain shot across my cheek, a slap from my mother. Get out, she hissed, her voice low but menacing. Get out of my house. Touching my stinging cheek, I felt like I was in a surreal nightmare. I scrambled upstairs, throwing essentials into my backpack, clothes, my phone, school papers, and the little cash I had saved. The sounds of my stepfamily's laughter and yelling faded as I rushed out. Minutes later, I was on Hannah's porch, with my classmate from biology. Without a word, she pulled me into a comforting embrace as soon as she saw my tear-streaked face and my packed backpack. Sitting in Hannah's kitchen now, contemplating my future and how I'd manage college, Hannah's Aunt Valentina walked in with a scrutinizing look. So you're the girl Hannah has mentioned, she remarked. It turned out Aunt Valentina owned a quaint Italian restaurant downtown, complete with a small studio apartment above it. Almost immediately, she offered me a job and the apartment at half rent, including free meals and flexible hours to accommodate my college schedule. The place needs a bit of work, but it's safe and clean, she added. I began working as a waitress, absorbing every aspect of the restaurant business. Valentina was a stern yet fair mentor, often pointing out the nuances of the industry that my college course overlooked. Despite the apartment's modest size, it was my sanctuary, free from judgment and interference, a place where I could study and breathe freely. By the time I graduated with my business degree, Valentina had promoted me to an administrative role. I quickly assumed responsibilities for managing schedules, inventory, and staff. 3 years later, as I managed the day-to-day operations, Valentina hinted at retirement. Hannah and I have discussed it, and we think you should join as a partner, she said. You know the ins and outs of this business better than anyone. At that moment, my life came full circle, from feeling displaced and undervalued at home to becoming a respected and integral part of a thriving business. I realized how far resilience and determination could take me. The spark of passion was undeniable between us. Hannah and I spent the entire night discussing the possibilities, with the savings I had diligently put aside over the last few years and her innovative ideas to modernize the menu and expand the business. We can really make this happen, Alina, she said, her eyes alight with excitement. We can make it our own. So, we took the plunge. I invested every penny I had saved, and together, we transformed Valentina's traditional Italian restaurant into a vibrant, unique dining experience that was distinctly ours. Over the next few years, our success allowed us to open a second location across town. Walking through the restaurants, watching everything run like clockwork, I would often reflect on my past. It had been 12 years since that fateful night when my mother slapped me and threw me out. Although they still lived in the city, I occasionally caught glimpses of Freya's social media. We existed in completely separate worlds now. One busy afternoon, while Hannah and I were sorting through spreadsheets and discussing further expansion plans in our office above the downtown location, the sounds of an arriving party echoed from below. Sounds like the engagement party's here, Hannah noted, checking the schedule. 50 guests. It should be a good night. We had a tradition, one we started when we first took over the restaurant, personally greeting customers, gathering their feedback, and making them feel valued. This personal touch sets us apart from other venues, Hannah added. I'll go check on them. I offered to slip on my branded blazer and pin my name badge. The cheerful sounds of laughter and clinking glasses grew as I approached the main floor. A large party like this was an opportunity for repeat business and potentially more event bookings. I straightened my badge and wore my best professional smile, but as I approached the group, my smile faltered. At the head of the table sat my mother, her hair grayer but styled immaculately. Next to her was Ethan, visibly aged yet unchanged in demeanor. And there was Freya, radiant in a sparkly dress, holding hands with a man in a sharp suit. My sister's engagement party. For a moment, I considered retreating, but then my mother's eyes met mine, and I saw the flicker of recognition. Well, look who it is, she declared loudly, causing heads to turn. Our waitress for the evening. Ethan's face twisted into a familiar, contemptuous sneer. 32 years old and still serving tables. Can't say I'm surprised. I opened my mouth to respond, but my mother cut me off, her voice thick with scorn. I always knew you'd end up like this, she said. Look at your sister, a college graduate, an economist, marrying a wonderful man, and you still wearing a name tag and taking orders. Freya giggled, squeezing her fiancé's hand. Maybe she'll do our dishes tonight, right, Daddy? Show us her special skills. The floor's too clean, Ethan quipped, standing up. He seemed to have been drinking. In a swift, cruel motion, he grabbed a plate of salad from the table and hurled it to the floor. The crash silenced the room. I felt a sharp sting on my cheek and instinctively reached up to touch it. My fingers came away with blood. Oops, Ethan smirked, staring at the blood trickling down my face. Better get a mop, waitress. My blood boiled, and years of hurt and anger surged. Yet, standing there amidst the shards and the shocked stares of the guests, a calm resolve settled over me. I realized that this was no longer my world, and these people no longer had any power over me. My success, my achievements, and my dignity were defined not by their scorn, but by the respect and accomplishment I had earned through my own efforts and in a community that valued me. As I turned away to fetch the cleaning supplies, I decided this was the last time they would ever see me as just a waitress. My future was mine to shape, far away from their toxic reach. Just as I was about to unleash everything I had held back for years, Hannah's assertive voice sliced through the tension. This situation requires immediate attention, she declared with the calm authority she had inherited from her Aunt Valentina. In her hands was our service agreement, elegantly bound in leather with our restaurant's golden logo. Hannah cleared her throat and commanded the attention of everyone in the room. According to our service agreement, she began, her voice firm, any customers who engage in verbal abuse or physical assault against our staff or owners will be promptly asked to leave the premises. She paused, her eyes briefly meeting mine in a show of solidarity before turning back to the stunned crowd. Oh, and just in case you weren't aware, Hannah continued, her smile cutting like a blade, you're speaking to Alina Thompson, co-owner of this establishment and 3 others across the city. The silence that followed was profound. The shock was palpable as the guests and my family took in the opulent surroundings, the framed glowing reviews, and the sophisticated clientele they had overlooked. That's impossible. Ethan managed to choke out. His disbelief was evident. Furthermore, Hannah pressed on, in cases of assault, we reserve the right to terminate service immediately and without a refund. She then turned to me, giving me the lead. Alina, your call. I straightened my blazer, wiped the blood from my cheek with my sleeve, and with newfound resolve, I stated, clear the tables. All 80 guests need to leave now. Our staff moved into action, efficiently clearing the space as the engagement party was abruptly cut short. The protests started with Mrs. Henderson, Ethan's mother, who clutched her plate of pasta as if it were a treasure. You can't do this, she shrieked, reminiscent of the day she criticized my manners while pinching my cheeks. When one of our waiters, Adrian, attempted to retrieve her plate, she pulled it back, splattering sauce. "Help! They're attacking me!" Ethan surged forward, fists ready and face flushed with anger. "Get your hands off my mother," he bellowed, moving toward me. But our security was quicker, stepping in between, while another called the police. Amidst the ensuing chaos, Freya dissolved into tears, mourning her spoiled engagement party. "Mom, do something," she cried. But my mother stood frozen, mascara streaked down her cheeks, unable to meet my gaze. The next half hour was a whirlwind. The police arrived and took statements from witnesses, many of whom had recorded the incident on their phones. Ethan was handcuffed and led away, still spewing threats. An ambulance crew attended to my cheek, gently cleaning and bandaging the wound. As the guests left in a murmur of disbelief and speculation, the situation seemed to settle. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I recognized my mother's voice immediately, softer and almost pleading. "Alina, please don't hang up. Listen, about Ethan, the police are pressing charges. He could lose his job over this. You need to drop the charges." "No," I replied simply and hung up. The backlash on social media began within hours. My mother's first post depicted her as the victim of a vindictive restaurant owner who had ruined her daughter's engagement party. The post garnered a flood of sympathy, with people vowing never to patronize our restaurants. Then Freya added her narrative, painting me as the psychotic stepsister, envious of her happiness. As the post spread through local community groups, Hannah found me poring over the lies online. Her presence was a reminder of the strength and support I had in my chosen family, starkly contrasting the toxic ties I had once endured. In that moment, I realized the power of truth and integrity over falsehood and manipulation. Valentina had wisely installed a comprehensive security system years ago, designed to zoom in and record audio upon detecting loud voices or sudden movements. This system captured the entire scene at the engagement party with crystal clarity. Every threat from Ethan, every insult from my mother, and the resounding crash of the plate were all recorded. In response to my mother's misleading social media rant, I uploaded this footage in the comments section, accompanied by a straightforward note: "Here's what actually happened." The video went viral overnight, and soon other guests from the party began sharing their recordings as well. One video, in particular, highlighted the moment Adrian attempted to clear Mrs. Henderson's plate while she exploded in rage, pasta sauce flying. His demeanor was unflinchingly professional. This clip alone garnered millions of views, sparking a trend around restaurant drama that quickly escalated from local gossip to a national talking point. Food blogs and news outlets jumped on the story, headlining it as "Family Crashes Engagement Party at Daughter's Own Restaurant." The comment sections were inundated with people sharing their own experiences with family estrangement and toxic relationships. The fallout was immediate. Embarrassed by his public arrest and the viral video of him assaulting his stepdaughter, Ethan's company demoted him to a lesser role. He was also fined heavily by the court for assault and property damage. My mother attempted damage control by deleting her initial posts, but the internet never forgets. Screenshots of her words lived on. As for Freya, her wedding venue cancelled their contract, wanting no association with the scandal. Mrs. Henderson, now infamous as the "pasta lady," became a meme, her image of outrage plastered across social media. Watching the view count rise on the security footage, I recalled a mantra I held on to during the dark days after being thrown out: "Someday, things will be different." I had always imagined a future where my family would recognize their mistakes and seek reconciliation. But witnessing their actions that night in my restaurant, seeing their attempts to humiliate me despite all their successes, I realized some things are beyond mending. Some bridges are simply not meant to be rebuilt. This video did more than just clear my name. It boosted business. But the reason I kept it pinned to my profile was not for publicity. I kept it as a stark reminder, both for myself and for anyone who might see it, that sometimes the best ending isn't about forgiveness or coming back together. Sometimes the most fulfilling resolution is recognizing that it's perfectly acceptable to walk away and not look back. This lesson, hard-earned and bitterly taught, had finally set me free.